Luke and Clara had been married for only 2 weeks. After a small wedding at Clara's parents' house in Seattle, they decided to take a short honeymoon. Not to a tropical beach, but to a quiet countryside in Oregon. A place where it would be just the two of them, away from everyone else. They found the listing on Airbnb, a 2-story wooden cabin surrounded by pine trees, miles from the nearest town. The photos looked perfect. A cozy living room with a stone fireplace, a clean kitchen, and a small balcony overlooking a misty meadow. The reviews were all positive, peaceful and romantic. Perfect for couples looking for quiet. The host is kind but keeps her distance. The host's name was Marjorie. According to the profile, she lived about a mile away in another house on the same property. They booked it for 3 nights. The drive from Portland took nearly 4 hours. The farther they went, the narrower the roads became. Smooth asphalt turning into cracked dirt, then to gravel. When the GPS finally said they had arrived, they found themselves facing a large wooden gate, old and half collapsed. Beyond it stood the cabin from the pictures. Exactly the same, maybe even more beautiful. The air smelled of pine and rain. Everything was quiet. "This is perfect," Clara said with a smile. "Yeah," Luke replied, shutting off the engine. "Let's just hope it's not the opening scene of a horror movie." They entered using a code Marjorie had sent through Airbnb's chat. The door creaked open, and the scent of old wood and lavender filled the air. Inside, the place looked well kept. Cozy, clean, and strangely still. On the coffee table sat a small handwritten note. "Welcome, Luke and Clara. I hope you enjoy your stay here. This house has a long history, but don't worry. It's kind to guests who respect it." Clara laughed softly. What does she mean, a long history? Sounds like the start of a ghost story. Luke shrugged. Probably just means it's old. They unpacked and explored. The living room had worn but comfortable furniture. The kitchen was small but spotless. Upstairs, the bedroom had a wide window facing the woods. And on the wall, an oval mirror framed with rusted metal. Clara stood in front of it. "It's beautiful," she said, but something about her reflection looked off, dimmer, slightly warped, like there was a faint shadow behind her. When she turned around, nothing was there. "Probably just the lighting," Luke said, joining her. "Yeah," Clara replied quietly. "Just lighting." That first night was calm. They ate instant pasta, drank red wine, and sat in front of the fireplace, watching a movie on Luke's laptop. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft, rhythmic, almost peaceful. Sometime after midnight, Luke woke up. At first, he didn't know why. Then he heard it. Slow, deliberate, from downstairs. He held his breath. Clara was still asleep beside him. He listened again, maybe the wood expanding, maybe his imagination. Then another sound, a creak. Then 2 more steps. Luke quietly sat up, grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The moment he did, the footsteps stopped. He waited. Nothing. Only the faint sound of rain on the roof. He walked down the stairs, each step groaning under his weight. The living room was dark, lit only by the dying glow of the fireplace. He scanned the area with his phone's light. Nothing. The front door was locked. The windows were shut. But when he turned toward the coffee table, he froze. The welcome note, the one that said, "Welcome, Luke and Clara," was no longer in its place. It had been moved, and below it, there was a new line written in pencil. "Thank you for coming back." Luke stared at it for a long moment. He was sure it hadn't been there before. Maybe Clara had written it as a joke? No. The handwriting was small, neat, almost mechanical. He placed it back where it was, shook his head, and went upstairs. He didn't tell Clara anything. The next morning was bright. Sunlight poured through the curtains, filling the room with golden dust. Clara was already awake, making coffee. "You were up late," Luke said, stretching. Clara smiled faintly. "I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing footsteps downstairs. I thought it was you." Luke froze. "When exactly did you hear them?" "Maybe 10 minutes before you turned on your flashlight." Neither spoke for a while. They both wanted to believe it was nothing. They went out that day, exploring a small diner in town, walking through antique shops, laughing like nothing had happened. By the time they returned, the sun was setting. But as soon as they stepped inside, the air felt different, colder, heavier, and there was a faint metallic smell in the air. Clara went to put away groceries. Luke headed upstairs. When he entered the bedroom, he noticed the mirror again. It wasn't hanging straight anymore. It had tilted slightly, facing the bed. He frowned. "We didn't move that." He straightened it, then stared into the glass. For a brief second, he thought he saw someone standing behind him. A woman. Long hair, white dress. He turned around quickly. Nothing. Just the empty room. When he looked back at the mirror, the shadow was gone. That night around 2 a.m., Clara woke up. She thought she heard Luke whispering, but when she turned, he was sitting upright, staring out the window. "There's someone outside," he whispered. Clara sat up. Through the thin curtains, a light moved in the darkness. A flashlight, bobbing slowly among the trees. They watched in silence as it came closer. Then it stopped, right in front of the house. No footsteps, no knocking. Just a pale light shining toward their window. Clara gripped Luke's hand. "We should call the police." Before he could reach for his phone, the light went out. Luke ran downstairs, heart pounding. He opened the front door. Nothing. The fog was thick, the air damp and still. No sound, no movement. He flipped the porch light switch, but it didn't work. Then he looked up and saw scratch marks along the wooden beams above the door, and near the frame, the faint outline of a handprint, smudged with dirt. He said nothing when he came back upstairs, but before returning to bed, he noticed something again on the coffee table. The note, with another line added, "You both look happier this time." The next morning, Luke decided they needed to leave. He didn't care about the refund. He didn't care about anything except getting out. While Clara packed, she froze. "Luke, did you move my clothes?" "No, why?" She slowly pulled something from her suitcase, a white dress. Old, faded, smelling of mothballs and something stale. "This isn't mine," she whispered. "I swear this wasn't here before." Luke picked it up. The fabric was delicate, almost fragile. Inside the collar, written in small cursive letters, were the initials MH. He tried to stay calm. Maybe someone left it here. Maybe the host. "But how did it end up in my suitcase?" Clara interrupted. They stared at each other, both realizing the same thing. None of it made sense. Luke nodded slowly. "We're leaving." Now he went downstairs to clean up. But when he reached the kitchen counter, he noticed dark stains, dried reddish brown. They trailed from the window to the sink like something had dripped. Outside, in the fog, faint footprints led into the woods. Small footprints, bare. He shut the curtains immediately. When he returned upstairs, Clara was gone. "Clara!" No answer. He searched the bathroom. Empty. The balcony. Empty. Then he heard it. Above him. From the attic. He stared at the ceiling. There was a small square hatch and a pull string. He hesitated, then grabbed the string and pulled it down. A folding ladder dropped with a dull thud. Cold air spilled out. He climbed slowly, his phone flashlight trembling in his hand. The attic smelled like dust and old wood. Stacks of boxes, covered in cobwebs. In the corner, an old rocking chair, a thin blanket draped over it. And on the wall, a black and white photograph. A woman, long dark hair, a white dress, the same one from Clara's suitcase. Luke stepped closer. Underneath the photo was a small brass plaque. Marjorie Hensley, 1954 to 1979. His stomach dropped. That was the host's name. He turned around and rushed down the ladder, calling Clara's name. Then he heard the front door open. Luke, It was her. She stood in the doorway, shivering. Where were you? Luke gasped. I could ask you the same thing, she said. I went outside because I heard a woman calling my name. Luke's face went pale. What did she say? She just kept saying, "Come back." They drove off minutes later. Neither of them spoke during the entire drive. When they finally got phone service, Luke called the number listed on the Airbnb page. A woman answered. Younger, calm, confused. Hi, this is Luke. My wife and I just stayed at your property in Elk Hollow, Oregon. The one under the name Marjorie? I'm sorry, she said. Did you say Marjorie's property? Yes, Luke said. Are you the owner? Another pause. Then, Sir, that house hasn't been listed on Airbnb for over 2 years. Marjorie Hensley, my grandmother, died in that house in 1979. No one's lived there since. The property's been abandoned. Luke's mouth went dry. He looked at Clara beside him, her face as white as chalk. The woman continued, her voice trembling now. There shouldn't even be a cabin there anymore. It burned down decades ago. The foundation is all that's left. There's no power, no furniture, nothing. Luke hung up slowly. Clara stared out the window, whispering, then, where did we stay? They went to the local sheriff's office the next day. Officers drove to the location Luke described. When they returned, they said the same thing. There was no house, just charred remains of a cabin long gone. A few stone steps, a fireplace collapsed into ash. On a wooden post nearby was a faded sign, Hensley Property, no trespassing. A week later, back in Seattle, Luke and Clara tried to move on. They told themselves it was just a misunderstanding, a mix-up, a nightmare. But Clara kept waking up at night, always from the same dream, standing before the oval mirror, and behind her reflection, a woman in white, smiling faintly. One morning, while cleaning their bags, Clara found something wedged inside her camera case. A Polaroid photo. Her breath caught. It was a picture of them, sleeping in bed at the cabin. Neither of them had taken it. At the bottom of the photo, typed faintly in old ink, were the words, "Thank you for coming back." Clara dropped the photo. Luke picked it up, staring at it in silence. You didn't put this here, did you? She whispered. He shook his head slowly. No, I thought you did. They both turned toward the living room window as a cold breeze drifted through. The curtains swayed gently, and in the faint reflection on the glass, for just a second, they saw the outline of a woman in a white dress standing behind them.